Welcome back to the BG Sports Show presented by Sports Radio America. I'm your host, Baxter Colburn. Just a reminder for all of you that if you enjoy listening to the BG Sports Show, you can go and find us on Facebook by going and liking our page, the BG Sports Show, and you can go find us on Twitter at BG Sports Show. You can follow myself at Baxter Colburn. So for those of you that were listening to the show back on Thursday, you know that we chatted with the executive producer of Sports Radio 1560 The Fan in Melbourne, Florida, Anthony Nachreiner, a little bit about the NFL free agent market and everything that is swirling around with that. But now we're bringing Anthony back into the show, but we're talking about high school sports and the little bit of a difference between Florida and Wisconsin. For those of you that don't know, we're based here in the Milwaukee area. I have an opportunity to cover a lot of the high schools around the Milwaukee area through broadcasting and a lot of different things. And Anthony is now stationed down in Melbourne, and he gets to do a lot of play-by-play broadcasting as well. So welcome back to the show, Anthony. It's great to have you back on.
I appreciate it, Baxter. Always fun to come on your show, and I always appreciate the invite, man.
Not a problem at all. So high school sports is the topic of the day here, Anthony, and you and I both know that high school sports in the great sunshine state of Florida is a whole nother level. People talk about how football is a religion, high school football is a religion in Texas. Well, football and soccer and basketball, and the list could go on and on and on in high school. In Florida is a whole nother way of life, honestly. I mean, I had the opportunity to play football and soccer in Florida in the high school level, and you also got to do some of that as well. But in your experience and everything that happens, what do you see in terms of what high school students do down there to get ready and to their dedication to a game even at such a young age?
Well, I think the biggest difference is climate. And, you know, a lot of the kids down here in the Sunshine State, they get to train for, I don't know, 10 out of 12 months a year almost. If they're doing just one sport, they get to train. They get to do their sport as often as they want, any time they want. Now, there's obviously some restriction. You know, obviously you can't have team practices in high school down here in the state of Florida, but you can go to so many different camps. This past weekend, we had the Nike opening in Orlando. Just so many different avenues for so many of these athletes to be able to go and showcase their talents, and I think that's the biggest key as well, is because of that climate, plus the training atmosphere. You're not dealing with a cold wind, and you're not dealing with the cold as you are in Wisconsin, which makes it even more difficult, I think, because I've tried running in below freezing temperatures.
Yep.
It's not really all that much fun, and I don't think running, exercising, and doing that kind of those drills for football or any sport in the winter is very easy.
I agree with you on that one. Yeah, I've done training in both climates for both soccer and football, playing college sports up here in Wisconsin and high school sports down in Florida. It's the difference between training in the wintertime. It feels like you're being stabbed in the chest repeatedly by the cold weather anytime you run, while in Florida you're just like, I'm just really hot more than anything. And I never really experienced too cold of weather at all. I mean, I remember playing high school soccer in Florida because that's a winter sport, and that always blows people's mind up here in the north. It's like, wait a minute, you played high school soccer and football? They're like, yeah, how did that work? I'm like, oh, well, soccer's a winter sport in Florida. They're like, but how does that work? I'm like, well, it only gets down to like 40 or 50 degrees in the peak of winter time, so we can still play and not worry about freezing. We just put on a layer and call it a day, honestly.
You're absolutely right. I mean, and with Florida winters, which really aren't winters, they're more
They're
like
really
cool
not.
periods.
There's no snow. There's no sleet. There's no hail. I mean, depending on, you get hail if it hurricanes, but that's a whole other topic.
I was going to say, usually if you're getting hail, you got about a week's advance notice that hail was coming with that hurricane.
Yeah.
So you have no excuses. But yeah, I mean, like I said, it's fun down here. You get 1 week of cold, and that's really about it down here. And we just finished up the soccer state championships almost about 2 weeks ago,
Sure.
Right here in my backyard, and had a couple of local teams from this area playing. The Space Coast of Florida, which is Cape Canaveral, and I know a lot of our listeners know from the NASA days.
Yep.
I'm about 45 minutes away from NASA, so if you look up and down the strip where Cape Canaveral is, that's where the Space Coast is, and this is a hotbed for soccer, especially at the high school level. We've had multiple state champions. We've had back-to-back state champions. We've had men's and women's from the same school dominate their classifications as well. Plus now we're getting the Orlando City soccer B team that's going to be playing here locally in my area as well.
Okay.
So soccer is taking over just about as predominantly as football is. I don't know if it'll ever take over football, but right now they're getting pretty close to neck and neck here in the Space Coast.
Yeah, I'd agree with you on that one. It's always an interesting fact, though, too, from a recruiting standpoint. You always hear about the northern schools trying to recruit, kids from Florida. Oh, we got to get that running back from Florida, or we got to get that, that awesome goalkeeper from Florida, or whatever. But I think, honestly, in my opinion, recruiting players from Florida to bring them up to the Midwest is kind of not the smartest recruiting move, honestly, because yes, you can get some high class athletes, but their body and their level of skills is totally different and accustomed to playing in different conditions than what you bring them into in the Midwest. And yes, I know there's success stories of kids, coming from Florida and going to different, Midwest schools and doing really well in college, but the climate change, though, is totally different. You take out the humidity, you add in the freezing cold or the dynamic freezing rain or even snow at times, and coaches are sitting there going, what the heck, this was a 4 or 5 star recruit that I brought in, and they can't seem to do anything in this cold weather, or now that they've come to play for me. And I think, honestly, that some schools forget about that when they're trying to go after that star athlete down in the Florida.
Well, I guess I would say, Baxter, is that the way you would look at it is speed kills no matter what happens. If you're fast, you're going to be fast, when it's nice out.
Yes.
You're going to be fast when it's raining out. You might slip and fall, but you're going to be fast. I think the key is for a lot of those northern schools, and what you need to hit, and especially here Florida as well, every state needs to do its best job of recruiting its own players. Get the best athletes from your own state first, and then try and go get some of the best athletes from some of these other states. Florida does have the dynamic because we have so many high school athletes and so many guys that can go play at the next level. But like you said, it's a transition period. There's a lot of kids that go up north, but they don't last there very long because it's just too far away. They don't like the conditions, so they end up coming someplace a little bit closer to home and a little bit farther south. So it's a give and take, but with states and especially schools, the Division I colleges and even the D2s and D3s, you got to do the best job you can of recruiting within your state because, let's face it, your name is going to be the first name those kids see in that area. From Florida, I could throw a rock in the ocean, and there's not going to be anybody that knows what Wisconsin Lutheran College or Lakeland College or what any of these colleges are because they're not seeing these names because they're up in Wisconsin. Now, like a Florida Tech, people will know who that is, or another Gulf South Conference Division II football program.
Sure.
But you know what? In the recruiting process, you find out about these names, and then that happens. But ultimately, it's up to the kid. I think a lot of times, if it's up to the kid willing to work in the off season and willing to adapt to these changes, that's going to be the overall difference too, especially with these athletes. If they're willing to work and put in the body of work to get better, it doesn't matter what climate they're in, that is what's going to make them successful, and that's what's going to make the program better.
Overall, that's exactly what you want from a coaching perspective. Yeah, chatting with the executive producer for Sports Radio 1560 The Fan in Melbourne, Florida, Anthony Nachreiner here on the BG Sports Show. Now, Anthony, in your experience, switching gears just a little bit, going to the broadcast side of things now of high school sports, have you had the opportunity to call some pretty big games down there in Florida? That's correct, right?
Yes, I have. I've gotten to call pretty much every playoff game's big down here. You get sellout crowds. But yeah, we got to call some pretty big ones. Just recently, we called Vieira versus Lakeland, the Lakeland Dreadnoughts, which was a storied house program over the last decade. Great game, but just always getting great games. Also regional finals, and we had to call a state final between St. Thomas Aquinas and Vieira.
Oh, sure. Yep, I'm very familiar with St. Thomas Aquinas. Yeah, growing up down in that Naples, Florida area, we heard about St. Thomas all the time. We heard about Miami Heritage, I think, was another one. And then, American Heritage. American Heritage,
yeah. Booker T.
Yeah. You heard all about those schools.
South.
Yep, all those schools from like that Miami area. You're just like, you never ever wanted to deal with them. But those are the schools that you always would watch those highlight films for, and you'd see those up and coming Division I stars or NFL stars. Now, in your experience, Anthony, do you feel like people and fans are more into what happens at those bigger high school games than like maybe just a regular season college football game sometimes, or just college basketball game at times?
Well, I think it's because it's more localized. I actually would say yes. I think a lot of people, you could even say even high school basketball, if you got a team that's good enough, they're going to draw a big crowd. Everyone's going to come out to the game, and they're going to, we'll record the game on DVR if it's a big time college game.
Sure, yep.
But I think with high school, it's just more local. You feel a part of it. There's fan bases. I mean, I'll tell you what, when we went to the Citrus Bowl for the Vieira High School team that went to the 7A States Finals, we filled the lower bowl. We sold all the allowed tickets. We sold 5,000 Vieira Hawks fans. Now, granted, unfortunately, Vieira didn't come out on the winning end like everybody wanted, but still, you had 5,000 people on a December night come out to about an hour drive to the Citrus Bowl and support their high school team because, like I said, you don't get many opportunities to do regional final games or state final games or go very deep in the playoffs.
Yep, no, I'd agree with you on that one. Yeah, it's interesting, too. Playoff time, at least up here in the Milwaukee area, I got to experience a couple of different big games with some schools like Oconomowoc, and I also saw the powerhouse Arrowhead as well for many years. They did they had a huge storied year this year. Franklin School as well, high school was another big one. So you see those thousands of people come out for those big game rivalries, and even just, high school football and even high school basketball as well. People love to come out to those games and keep up with what's going on in the high school scene. Well, Anthony, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. Again, thank you for taking the time today to join us here on the BG Sports Show.
Baxter, always a pleasure to have it's always fun to have me on, man. I appreciate it, and like I said, I always appreciate you inviting me on. It's always a blast.
Absolutely. We'll have to have you back again in the near future.
You got it, man. Anytime.
All right. That is the executive producer for Sports Radio 1560 The Fan in Melbourne, Florida, Anthony Nachreiner, here on the BG Sports Show. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we've got more exciting sports action for you. Don't touch that dial.